Hello and welcome to the fourth anticipatory briefing of the 2025 GESDA Summit. We're going to talk about the science of language and communication. Human language is shaped by cognitive constraints and cultural diversity, influencing how we think, learn, and relate to one another. As AI and cross-cultural communications advance, understanding language, structure, and evolution becomes more important than ever. How will these new insights into language shape education, technology, and society over the next 5, 10, and 25 years? It's going to be the topic of our session, 15 minutes presentation by our speaker, and then 15 minutes Q&A with you in the audience. Our speaker has chaired the Anticipation Committee on Language and Communication, which you find in the radar. It's chapter 4.6. She's a professor of experimental linguistics at the Center for Language Evolution at the University of Edinburgh. I got everything right to this point. Please help me welcome Jennifer Culbertson.
Thank you, and thank you for coming here to hear more about language. So I want to start by taking the linguistic temperature of the room. It's hard to see a little bit, but can you raise your hand if you speak these languages? Everybody speaks English, is that right? Who speaks French? German? Spanish? Chinese? Arabic? Anyone speak what they would consider a minority or indigenous language? Amazing. So that's pretty good for one room. If we look across the whole globe, we've got around 7,000 languages that are spoken or signed today. So language is a universal part of being human. We all have a mother tongue. Most of us speak more than one language. And it's not an exaggeration to say that language has enabled the success of human civilization. So human languages allow us to share information with each other, to preserve the knowledge that we have, and really to build on it over time. That's one of the most important roles that language has. So imagine if you were trying to learn a complex skill or a really tricky concept without language. It would be really not easy to do. So human language is definitely special, but all living things communicate, from plants to insects to animals. And human language and communication systems more broadly have huge implications for individual populations, for species, and for how we all connect to each other in the environment. So as a linguist, I have the sense that we are at an important inflection point. And I want to illustrate that for you more concretely using 3 predictions about the future. So first, in the next 50 years, despite their cultural, economic, scientific importance, we're likely to see a massive loss of linguistic diversity. So on this map here, every little point that has red color to it is a language that's projected to become endangered or lost during this time span. That's a serious, serious loss. And this goes hand in hand with the rise of global languages like English and Chinese that are going to continue to gain dominance while these other languages are lost. Okay, so second, and you will have seen this coming, in the next 50 years, we're going to see a massive increase in the use of generative AI. So scientists or academics like myself are very worried about whether our students are going to be using AI to write their papers, but scientists are already doing this. So we can see over the past 10 years the increase in the use of large language models to help us write our papers in different fields. And more generally, that kind of new way of using language is really going to reshape how we interact with and communicate with each other and how we interact with machines. And importantly, societies who have access to these tools are going to have them integrated into the technologies they use to communicate. And societies that don't have access to those tools are not. So third, in the next 50 years, we're going to see a massive increase in migration. So here's some projected increases in migration in the EU in terms of millions of people under 4 different sort of simulated scenarios. And even under kind of middle-of-the-road assumptions, huge demographic shifts in the world are coming. And this has implications for us as humans as we communicate with new types of people, new languages we encounter. Communication is going to be impacted by differences in the people that we encounter around us. Okay, so those projected changes, things that we are pretty sure are going to happen, present some challenges and some opportunities for research in language and communication. So let me tell you a little bit about what I think is going to happen in the next 5 years. All right, so everyone in the room has probably used ChatGPT in English. According to OpenAI, there's support for more than 80 languages. But raise your hand if you've ever tried to use one of these tools in a language other than English. OK. So if you have, you might rightly be a bit skeptical about what the word support means. So these tools are not equally good in all different languages. The good news is that that's likely to improve a lot in the next 5 years. And that brings with it the opportunity to bring these tools to many more populations. But it's also something that we can potentially leverage to help address the issue of language loss that I was mentioning before. So for example, if linguists and communities collect data about these under-resourced or underserved languages, that can help to improve AI models, AI tools for those languages. And those AI tools, in turn, can help speed up language revitalization efforts. So imagine if your mother tongue was dying out. What would the implications of that be for your ability to get an education, for your connection to your culture, your history? So we know, the science shows, that access to your mother tongue has really important implications for your educational success, for your economic success. OK, so we know a lot as scientists about the diversity of human languages. So human languages can be radically different from one another, and that tells us something about the flexibility of our language capacity. But how did that language capacity evolve? Where does it come from? How does it relate to animal communication systems? So new computational tools, along with a much richer database, is actually allowing us to do some really cool new things in terms of understanding the structure of animal communication systems, but also in some cases starting to make inferences about what these systems, what meanings these systems might convey. So what you're seeing here are the different kinds of calls or vocalizations that are made by bonobos. So bonobo is a type of chimp. And if you see an orange point up there, so for example, a high hoot and a grunt, the intersection of those gives you an orange color. And what that means is that those two calls are used in different circumstances, different situations, different contexts. And that gives us a clue that these two calls actually have different meanings for bonobos. So just to give you a little bit more of an intuition about what I mean by that, like if you think of a word in English like dog and a word like computer, well, we use those two words in very different contexts because they have very different meanings. So differences in context give us a sense for that. So this is just a kind of taster of what is going to become possible. Are we going to be able to speak dog soon? Oh, no, not quite yet, but I think we're making interesting strides. And these kinds of developments, I think, are going to help overturn some long-held assumptions about differences between animal communication systems and language. We're also in the midst of an explosion in terms of data sets about language. So by this, I don't mean raw data or text that feeds AI models. I mean databases of hundreds of grammatical and demographic features for thousands of different languages. And right now, these databases are starting to be augmented by behavioral and genetic data, and that can allow us to answer some really fine-grained questions about, for example, as population demographics shift, what kinds of expectations can we have about how a language might change? So new technological tools and understanding of linguistic diversity is super important, but we also want to know, how does a language impact our minds? And in particular, how do multiple languages impact our minds? So multilingualism is the default state of humans. So if you're like me from the US, you might not know that, but it's definitely true. And the science is coming in, showing us to what degree bilingualism or multilingualism is actually good for our brains, and how that can impact us over our lifespan. OK, so where are these advances likely to lead us in the next 10 years? Well, if you had to guess, how much of the internet right now do you think is generated by AI? Raise your hand if you think it's 10%. 20%? Well, good. That is definitely true. That is definitely true. So by some estimates, around 70% of new content on the web is either generated by AI or with the help of AI in some way. So that's pretty big. And that has implications both for the models themselves and some big open questions in terms of how that impacts human communication. So for example, we know that AI models that are trained on their own data tend to degenerate. So they actually can start producing kind of gibberish, like a bad game of telephone. But how does interaction between humans and AIs impact human communication? So I think we're going to know a lot more in the next 10 years about what the effects of this kind of human-AI hybrid communication are or in our languages. So how does it change how we speak, how we write? Is there evidence of degeneration of human language? So human linguistic data is relatively easy to come by. Animal data is a lot trickier to come by, but I think in the next 10 years, we're going to see a lot more of it coming in. And this is going to allow us to make a lot of big strides in terms of understanding the structure and meanings of animal communication systems. And interestingly, I think this will go beyond primates. So we'll start getting much richer data sets about animal communication systems, including whales, bats, birds. And that's really interesting because human language has things in common with not just primate communication systems, but also the communication systems of these other animals. So primate signals have meanings. They refer to things out there in the world. That's part of human language. But another important part is vocal learning. So we are very good at imitating and learning new sounds around us. And that's an ability we share with whales, bats, and birds. And understanding exactly the kind of environmental, social, biological mechanisms that would have led to that in other species helps us to understand how that evolved in humans. So we're also going to see in the next 10 years some really interesting new empirical methods. So for example, researchers have for a long time been interested in understanding how language is represented and processed in the brain. And one of the best ways to do this is through imaging. But imaging is really expensive. If you've ever been in an fMRI machine, you know they're massive. But new tools are cropping up that are much more portable. So for example, this MRI machine that was designed in the UK to be used in the global south, and that's really going to democratize a bit whose data we're actually studying, so whose brains are represented in the science of language. And that's really important for understanding, for example, how flexible our linguistic capacity can be. How is it that babies' brains are able to be attuned to whatever language they encounter? And what happens to the adult brain to make that ability kind of go away as we age? So learning and understanding more about how human language learning is done might also eventually improve your Duolingo score. That might be good news to some of you. So you might have to wait a little while, but tuning these applications in a more bespoke way to individual learners might help to improve adult language learning outcomes. And that might be particularly important in societies where multilingualism increases. So as our populations change and are affected by migration, I think capitalizing on the benefits of multilingualism is particularly important. So where is this likely to lead us in the next 25 years? So the 25-year horizon for research on language and communication, we're very likely to see new AI architectures develop. And I think these AI architectures are likely to involve doing more with less linguistic data, less environmental impact. And one potential outcome of this could be more human-like linguistic representations, more human-like language learning abilities. So after all, human babies are incredibly efficient language learners. So these models currently need 4 to 5 orders of magnitude more data than a human child needs to learn language. So alongside development of new AI architectures, we will see truly diverse, globally represented linguistic data sets, hopefully including rich sources of data from genetics and imaging. And this will allow us, I hope, to start making progress on stemming the tide of loss of linguistic diversity. It will also help us to do some things we'd never been able to do before, like take particular languages and make predictions about how they might change in the near future. if I'm right, and the diversity of our linguistic data sets also goes beyond humans to include animals, I think we're likely to see new research horizons open in terms of human-animal communication. So I do think that that's a possible future for us. But all of these things are happening in the context of migration, climate change. We don't know yet how these things are going to impact our future. And I think, generally speaking, the science of language and communication potentially has a lot to offer in terms of helping us be resilient in the face of these changes. A lot of them involve the potential loss of biological, cultural, and linguistic diversity. But I think losing this diversity really puts a huge limits on what this science can achieve for humanity. So I think right now is a super important time to be thinking about making policies that really support us continuing to have the benefit of linguistic diversity, both as individuals and as societies, and hopefully thinking beyond humans to see communication systems in as broad a lens as possible. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Jennifer. There is a country where such a discourse will resonate. It's Switzerland, with our 4 official languages and the 5th being English, unofficial but very much used. Do we have questions? Please raise your hand. We have a microphone. We're going to start here, and then my friend Min Young, you're going to go second. Oh, okay, you go first. That's fine. And then we have 4 hands.
Oh, thank you. Thank you very much for the very nice talk. My name is Min Young Kim. I'm a mathematician. In recent years, some very prominent AI researchers have suggested that the machine learning models suggest very different ideas about the nature of language than what a lot of theoretical linguists have worked on over the last few decades, especially Chomskyan linguistics, for example. What is the current status on this debate? And do you have a view on it?
Yeah, I think you're exactly right. So there has, for many years, been debate between a kind of more data-driven view of how we learn and represent language, compared to a view that takes our mental architecture to be shaped by innate constraints, to be more symbolic in its nature. And I think the jury is still out. I think this has been an old debate, and the current advances are really rejuvenating that debate. I think we will know a lot more once we get a better sense for how we can analyze the representations that these models have. So that's something that's happening right now. And I think that will allow us to understand a lot more about what actually are the parallels between these large language model systems and humans. We don't know yet whether they're solving the same problem, but in different ways. So I think the jury is out, but we'll probably know a lot more pretty soon.
Yeah, the start of the Gen AI wave is a paper in 2017 called Attention is All You Need, right? Where they figure out that you can hack language and predict the next word. So both fields are very much intertwined these days, thanks to mathematics and linguistics. Sir, your question, please.
Yes, my name is Gabor Farkas. I have an easier question for you. In controlled environments, we have seen the emergence of languages developed by machines. They talk together and invent a language. What can we learn from that, and how will that impact our ways of communicating? Are we going to take clues from the way they communicate and incorporate that into the way we speak with machines or together?
Yeah, good question. So I come from a background where we're interested in language evolution, and one of the things we've always been interested in is simulating that process. So how did a language get off the ground in the first place, and what different constraints shape it? So if people are just learning a language but not using it to communicate, that language looks really different from a language that has to be transmitted from generation to generation and also used to communicate. And these are the kinds of things that we can look at using these models of emerging language. So we can ask, okay, well, what if you inject this kind of pressure? What if you bring in social pressures? How do these things shape the systems that emerge? So I think we can ask interesting scientific questions about how languages are shaped by different forces by looking at these emerging systems. Whether we're going to learn anything that would be particularly useful for making our communication systems more functional, maybe. I'm not sure.
Sir.
Hi, my name's Crawford Barber. I'm from the Wellcome Trust. I was interested because, as an ignorant Englishman that only speaks one language, you spoke about the benefit of like speaking multiple language and linguistic diversity. So rather than everyone speaking one language and being able to communicate and things seemingly feeling easier that way, what do you think the benefits would be for developing trust in science and being able to communicate that globally, of maintaining these sort of diverse languages?
Yeah, so you had a couple of questions kind of built in there, but I think the first thing to say is just to reiterate that being multilingual is something that our brains can do. It's not a problem. And while it may seem at one level that it would be better for us all to speak one language, I think that ignores what our languages really do for us socially. So languages are a really crucial part of our identity. They connect us with our culture, they connect us with our histories. If we lose those languages and become one homogeneous linguistic population, what we lose culturally is massive. And that's just setting aside, that's just the cultural part. I mean, there's also what science gains from understanding linguistic diversity. So if we only have one language to study as linguists, we really can't understand much about the human language faculty. So I think there's these two aspects that make a kind of future where we all speak a single language, not a future we want.
Sir, please stand up. Tell us your name and your question, and then we'll go to the person in front of you.
Thank you. I'm Ron Stoop. I'm a neuroscientist. Just been attending a fantastic lecture from you. Thank you. And also I attended a lecture from David Poppel, who's been looking at the moment at how you can define syllables and words and meanings and even context by just checking in the brain when the lights go on with the EEGs. So that might, I'm wondering, we have the language acquisition device that has been defined by Chomsky. Do you think that the 5 times faster learning that the babies do compared to the computers maybe depend on the fact that we have been instructed, that we are genetically pre-wired for these kinds of things? And should we, in this way, also instruct the computers?
Yeah, I mean, I think the jury is still out around the degree to which we are predisposed to language. I think in a certain way, yes, definitely, we are pattern learning machines, and that makes us good language learners. But I also think the constraints on our brains are important for how we actually represent language and how we are able to go beyond just what we hear and create new language, use language in creative ways. So, yeah, I think we are probably hardwired to some degree in ways that makes language easy for us to learn. But I think the limits that we have on our mental capacity I think that's something that shapes how our brains actually mentally represent language in a way that is not necessarily mirrored in computational systems right now.
I heard the story of when Champollion was trying to decode Egyptian, the mental model of the French language was getting in the way of him understanding, because in that language, like for example, it was not just singular and plural, there was something in between. So our mental model sometimes also prevents us from learning new languages, maybe.
Definitely.
We have your question, we're going to go here, and then we have another one here.
Christoph Nabold from Risk Insight. My question is to migrants who have difficulties accessing healthcare. When is going to be simultaneous translation fixing that problem?
Yep, that's a really good question. I think those tools are coming, but they very much depend on having adequate data for underserved languages so that those models can be developed. And my hope is that continues to happen. But there needs to be the funding in place and we need to work with communities to actually collect that data so that we make sure that these tools represent those languages well.
You see a lot of people assuming this works. Like I was crossing the border in Korea, and the way you talk to the agents is with an an AI that lacks it.
Right.
So you hope it's doing a good job, but you have no idea if it is actually doing a good job. Sir.
So, while I'm professor of mechanical engineering at the American University of Beirut, I have a question. Since these LLMs are sort of amplifying scientific research and its output, there's also the question of reviving languages, because every language that is not participating in knowledge production is on its way to disappear, even if it's widespread at the moment. So do you have a personal opinion of how to reintegrate knowledge production in the mother tongue for societies that have been adopting sort of foreign educational systems and foreign languages, especially for scientific subjects? Obviously, humanities and social sciences have to be in the mother tongue of the country. So the problem is mostly for physical sciences. The other question is also your personal opinion.
We have to make it quick, please.
Okay. So in linguistics, there's a divide whether meaning is randomly associated with a sound or whether certain sounds have inherent meaning. So where do you stand on that spectrum?
Okay, those are two very different questions.
We also need quick answers. I'm sorry, we have 3 minutes to go and we have more questions.
So for the first thing, I think what's really important is that countries continue to create language policies that really support and give context and value to minority languages. I think that has to be the basis of it. So we need to encourage people to continue to use those languages, to have access to education in those languages, and that can help to encourage those communities to collect data and help scientists develop the tools in their languages. So I think it has to be supported by policies from institutions. Your second question, whether sounds inherently have meanings. I think my view on that is no, they don't.
Madam.
Hi, Aisha Pioti from ETH Zurich and Drake Horizon. And I just follow up, in fact, on what you've just said regarding the need for policy for ensuring that we have linguistic diversity. That, in your opinion, if you had a wish right now with all the diplomatic community that's there, what would be the policies that you would like to see? And secondly, do you think enough is being done now for that?
Yeah, I mean, the answer is definitely not. So on the one hand, there are policies, and in many cases, there are some policies in place, and that's great. But I think it's also a question of whether the money is behind the policies. So in these communities, it's not enough just to have a policy in place. There actually needs to be enough support for example, teachers to be able to teach in these languages, for there to be actual educational resources available in these languages. So if I had a wish, it would be to do more to implement education in mother tongue. So put money behind that and allow training for teachers and allow development of resources in those languages.
We're going to try to take 2 questions in 1 minute.
Whoa.
A bit of pressure. Go ahead.
Okay, thanks. Well, so my name is Marco Cicali. I work at the Estonian Ministry of Foreign Affairs, but I was trained as a linguist myself, so I'm very happy to hear more about this topic. So one of the things that I'm concerned about specifically when it comes to large language models and the use of AI is that we already know at this point that, for example, in the United States, that things like Alexa and Siri, was it right, are very bad at recognizing non-standard varieties of English, like, for example, African-American vernacular English. In the case of Switzerland, where you have huge variety within dialects of German, how do we make sure that in the future we can account for non-standard varieties of language, sociolects, as well as regional dialects to be also represented in this way? Thank you very much.
Yeah, I think you're exactly right that some of these tools do more to kind of pressure us to homogenize our language. I do think there is improvement. I mean, when I first arrived in Scotland, there was no hope of any of these systems decoding Scottish. It's better now. But I think we have to be really intentional about how, dialects are not apolitical. And I think we have to really think about how things are represented in those tools.
It's a data problem, mostly we can. Go ahead, last question.
Hi, I'm Olivia Macaris. I work in international mediation. I'm from Belgium, and also we have 3 official languages in Belgium. My question is, would you, for any minority language, think that it's worth preserving at any cost, let's say, or is there also a view that some natural evolution and development is taking place, and that maybe some minorities would also, at some point, prefer and be better off to integrate in languages that are more widely used, because it's not necessarily to their advantage to continue?
I think that's a very fair question, and I think that's something that we should engage with those communities about. But I think you have to also be a little bit careful about making it a kind of either-or question. So as I was trying to point out, I think you can keep your mother tongue and your connection to your history and your culture and learn English at the same time. So if you make space for those languages, it's possible for them to stick around. So from a scientific point of view, there's no question. Yes, of course we should keep those languages around. And I think to encourage people to see the cultural value of their languages and not think about it just in terms of, like, I need to get a job, therefore I need English. I think that's something we need to keep sight of.
Very hard balances that we need to strike
Indeed.
with this question. Thank you. That was Jennifer Culbertson.
Thank you very much.